Welcome to the Rotary Times Show, a public service program presented by Rotary District 7610. Funding for this program is made possible by the generosity of Rotary District 7610, Virginia. On our programs, we talk with Rotarians and community leaders and discuss how Rotary International builds partnerships to support local, national, and world communities. I am your host, Rotarian Dr. Deborah Jackson from the Rotary Club of McLean, Virginia. Rotary has 5 focus areas, soon to change to 6. We are adopting climate control. But one of the 5 areas is education. So we're thrilled to be able to learn more about a historic school in our community, the Laurel Grove School Museum, which was built in the early 1880s as a one-room schoolhouse to serve Black children in the Franconia area of Fairfax County. Joining us remotely are Dr. Evelyn Russell, educator, and Mrs. Phyllis Ford, the museum's director. Dr. Russell and Mrs. Ford, welcome to the Rotary Times Show.
Thank you.
Great, we're glad you're here. As a former educator myself, former history teacher and school-based administrator, you're touching my heart with this show, as we're always looking at how education impacts our communities, or how we impact our communities through education. So I'm delighted to have you with us. We typically start our shows off, though, with looking at the speakers and asking the speakers to tell us a little bit about themselves. So I'd like to reach out to both of you and say, tell us a little bit about yourself, your education, your career, just a little bit of background you'd like to share with our viewing audience. Evelyn, Dr. Russell, we'll start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I am Dr. Evelyn Russell. I am a retired educator in Fairfax County, from Fairfax County. Like Dr. Jackson, I taught history for many years and served also as a school-based administrator. I've been in the area probably 25 years easily, and thoroughly enjoyed the area. Received a doctorate degree from Virginia Tech with historical research on the history of Black students in Fairfax County from 1640 to the building of Luther Jackson in 1954.
Wow, nice background from that historical piece. Mrs. Ford, how about you?
Hi, I'm Phyllis Ford, and I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you for inviting us. I grew up here in Fairfax County, actually in Franconia, Virginia. My career was spent at Verizon, and I have a MBA degree from Trinity University in Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. We're glad to have you both on to share, I'm going to call it historic moments. Tell us about how you both got involved in the Laurel Grove School project.
Well, as an educator, I have had an ongoing interest in education, the history of education, the disparities in education, in an effort to learn how to correct those disparities. With that, I do not live far from the Franconia area. I had driven by the school many, many times and finally went in one day, and certainly it warmed my heart. And I began working with Mrs. Ford as a volunteer. In addition, a volunteer / docent. In addition, I came in with docent experience as I'm a docent with the African American History Museum in Washington. Mrs. Ford and I worked together on a project I assisted with at the Luther Jackson School, looking at Black schools, African American education in Fairfax County. And this project brought in persons who either attended one-room schools or in some way were affiliated with one-room schools.
Oh, wow. Nice. Ms. Ford, how about you?
I got involved when my family decided to sell the property that they had been living on for a number of years. And the developer, Mark and Barbara Freed of Freed Companies in Springfield, found out that one of the buildings had been a one-room school and had been The land had been purchased in 1860 and the school had been started in 1881. And they decided that the building should be restored and a museum set up to tell the story of the African Americans who lived in Franconia at that time and their education.
So I assume from that the schoolhouse is still standing today.
Yes.
Great, great. That's good. We're going to learn a little bit more about that schoolhouse. Ladies, why was it necessary to have a separate colored school?
After the Civil War, the United States went into a period of Jim Crowism, a series of things, including voting, general life, every aspect of life became a part of the Jim Crow era, meaning separate but equal, which within itself, of course, is unequal. However, education specifically was a separate process. There was very little or no thought, short of perhaps some Quaker communities, that suggested that Blacks and whites should go to school together. With that, if African American children were to have an education, they relied very much on the community, the church, and other things that would resource that process. Hence the Laurel Grove School, the development of the Laurel Grove School.
How did, Mrs. Ford, how did you all get to know, or the builder to decide that he or she wanted to make this a historic landmark?
Well, the Freeds were very familiar with American history, and also they were a relative of Professor Ira Berlin at that time. He was at Maryland University, and he was able to, because of his knowledge of slavery, was able to actually tell the story that it was important for people to know the African American story from slavery and also beginning with purchasing land, and freed slaves began purchasing land in Fairfax County in 1860.
And you said you were from the Franconia area. Would you have had some descendants that may have also attended this school?
My father and his siblings all attended the school.
Okay, great. Wow. That's the special place, I'm sure, in your heart then. What happens to the students after they would leave Laurel Grove?
The choices were limited for children of color, as Fairfax did not offer opportunities for them. So students, if your parents could make it happen, would attend school in DC, which involved getting the train, usually in Franconia, to go there, which involved having money to make that trip. Also, often having a relative or someone in Washington to use their address. So you would either go to school in DC, or the Jenny Dean School did exist in Manassas, Virginia. It is now a museum spot as well. You will find, despite the disparities and the challenges, the families, the community, the church rallied behind the education of children, affording them the opportunity, using the trucks of neighbors and that type of thing to transport children.
How old were the students, and what grade levels, and what was actually taught during that time?
Grades 1 through 7 were actually taught at the school, and children ranged from age 5 up to 16 or 17. The transportation for them was using their feet. All the students who attended Laurel Grove actually walked. Some walked 5 miles one way.
Wow. And what were some of the subjects that were taught at that time?
Reading, math, English, penmanship, writing, and geography were some of the subjects.
Interesting. Did they have county support from the school system, the regular school system in the area at that time?
Fairfax County paid for the teachers and paid for 1 cord of wood each school term.
a cord of wood, and what would
Yes.
that wood be used for?
The school was heated by a wood burning stove.
Okay.
So the county provided that 1 quart of wood for that school term, but the families had to, of course, contribute wood so that the school would be heated during the winter months.
I've seen pictures of that interior, and that stove also served to prepare lunches for students. Is that right?
Yes.
Part of the school day involved, of course, a meal break, and the students would bring vegetables from their gardens. The teacher would bring meat or whatever. In the school, you will see when you visit an actual pot that would sit on that stove, and the teacher would tend that pot with the meat and vegetables so that the students at lunchtime would each have a small amount from the pot.
And they would also have a hot meal.
That is correct.
Yeah, that's amazing when we think about the hot meal today as opposed to the hot meals that they had, then. So,
Right.
and of course,
Also note, Dr. Jackson, that a cord of wood is really not a lot for a full winter. People don't use wood in the same way now, but a cord of wood is not a lot. So families would have to, of course, donate access, and one of the older boys in the class would make sure the wood got to the stove.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I guess the kids had roles somewhat similar to what we do assign kids in classrooms, but these young people had roles too during this time, and one of those was ensuring that wood got to that pot or the furnace.
Correct.
Correct, great. Has the building always been a school?
It has not always been a school. The school actually closed in 1932, and students who were left to attend, at that time it was only 7 students left. Those students were sent to Gum Springs Elementary School. So the county auctioned the school off in 1955, and the successful bidders were Alma and Thurman Bushrod. And they turned it into a little cottage, and that cottage was used for African-American students, college seniors who came to do their practice teaching. Also, it was used, it was rented out. Gotcha. And single women would normally come and stay there.
Okay. Hold that thought, because we're going to come right back. We're going to take a short break and be right back and talk more with Dr. Russell and Mrs. Ford about the Laurel Grove Colored School Museum in the Franconia area of Fairfax County. Please stay with us.
We are this close.
We're this close.
We are this close
Of wanting
to making history.
This close to changing the world.
We are this close.
This close to making sure no child suffers a crippling disease.
Ever again. This close.
We are this close to ending polio.
Ending polio.
All we need is you.
this close.
If we don't act now, we may lose this chance forever. Help Rotary make history at endpolionow.org.
Welcome back to the Rotary Times. We're here talking with Dr. Evelyn Russell, educator, and Mrs. Phyllis Ford, director of the historic Laurel Grove Colored School Museum, which was built in the early 1880s as a one-room schoolhouse to serve Black children in the Franconia area of Fairfax County, Virginia. When we stopped, we talked a bit about the school, what happens, how it got started, where it is at this point. But let's talk about who were the early teachers. Dr. Russell, talk about, I know this is your specialty, talk about those teachers.
2 of the early teachers, one of them was Emma Quander. Emma Quander is a descendant of the Quander family that has been in Fairfax County for many years. Mrs. Nellie Quander is well known by many of us, county employee who passed, I think, a year or so ago. Emma Quander was actually 18 years old when she began teaching at the Laurel Grove School, and her salary was $28 a month. $28 a month. Now, in the state of Virginia, as well as Fairfax, there were major disparities between white and black teachers and even between male and female teachers. However, Ms. Quander, at age 18, earned $28 a month. Another teacher that came shortly after was an S.J. Jasper, a descendant actually of Mrs. Ford, the current director. So the teachers played many roles, as we shared earlier, from classroom maintenance to cooking to every other thing that you can imagine that it takes to run a school. And to keep a classroom with that many age groups going strongly.
Wow, yeah, you're right. Were these teachers hired by and recruited by Fairfax County, or did the community, support and recruit their own teachers?
As far as I know, Dr. Jackson, the community recruited their own teachers. These were both African American teachers who taught in one of the African American schools.
Wow, that is amazing. Mrs. Ford, can you talk to us about a typical school day?
Yes, a typical day started at 9 in the morning. Students would walk and make sure that they were there by 9. Also, no matter what the weather was, whether it was raining or snowing, they still came because students were told by their parents that education was important, and to get an education, everything would fall in place if they got that education. So to begin with, there were devotionals. There was a scripture reading, a prayer, and then a hymn was sung, and then the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Then classes started, and they would have the geography, reading, cursive writing, English, and those subjects.
So a teacher, Mrs. Ford, would have to be multi-talented if they had age ranges from 5 to, I think you said 17.
Yes.
That was probably a challenge, you think, or how was that handled?
It was very much a challenge, but the teacher would normally use the older students in the class to act as what we know today as assistant teachers, so that if she was teaching a reading class, then an older student would be working with other students there.
Okay. How many kids would you think were in a schoolhouse at any given time?
Some of the records that we were able to see, that the county records, showed that one class had 1 year there were 22 students in the class.
Okay.
That seemed to be the highest number.
Now, the students, Dr. Russell, do students have public transportation, or how did they get to school? We think today of students getting on a bus on Big Yellow and showing up at the building. How did they get there?
Largely community support. Community support was critical during this era for the Laurel Grove School, as well as for all of the schools for children of color in the state and in the county. So parents with trucks, cars, whatever, would load the children and bring them. In addition, many students walked. On one of the videos we have available for guests to see, we talked to 2 former students who indicated they walked 5 miles each way. So education was extremely important. It was something you wanted. It was something that you didn't mind making the walking sacrifice or the discomfortable sacrifice of not riding in a comfortable school bus. You wanted to get there. You wanted to get your education.
Ladies, and I'll toss this out to either one of you or maybe Ms. Ford. I understand that the school itself, our new state governor has now championed a commission to look at education in for Black students and just Black history in general in our books. How does this marry with what you all are doing in the school now? Because I think it's a museum now, so are you able to share some of this information with state commissions?
Yes, when we first started, we had worked with one of the local elementary schools on Beulah Street, just down from where the museum is located. And we worked with fourth grade teachers to develop a curriculum when they studied slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, and civil rights. So that curriculum is online on our website and is still there today for teachers to use. We've also done teacher workshops, helping teachers understand the story of Laurel Grove and how that can fit into their regular classroom lesson, social studies lessons. And Dr. Russell has been very instrumental in helping us with that.
Dr. Russell, talk to us about how that aligns with state curriculum.
Dr. Jackson, in keeping with the governor's initiative now to incorporate African American history in the state curriculum, utilizing Laurel Grove School is an opportunity to utilize a primary source to actually sit in that space, to actually handle some of the artifacts from that era. So it aligns very closely with the state curriculum. It is a very concrete effort to fill in some missing links and share information that has either been intentionally or unintentionally hidden or missing, but it needs to be present. So the Laurel Grove School serves as a place where teachers can come to fill in and learn what they may not have learned in a traditional university setting.
So when you all open your doors daily, you're opening them not just as a historic museum, but as a laboratory, you know, for learning for others, and that's inspiring, and I really commend you for that. I want us to just step back for a minute and look at the school itself. How is it used today? And if you mentioned that some of the descendants are they still alive? Have you heard stories from them about their experience or how they feel about Laurel Grove School compared to what they see today in today's school settings?
We were able to interview 8 students who actually went to Laurel Grove School and they were able to talk to us about what was happening during the time, their hardships of getting to the school and actually learning. One gentleman told us that he wasn't sure about his teacher when they were studying geography, and the teacher told him that in Holland, people wear wooden shoes, and he thought that maybe the teacher just didn't really know what she was talking about, so he kind of filed that away in the back of his mind. But when he grew up and joined the Army and was stationed in Holland, he realized that the teacher did know what she was talking about, and even though they studied geography without having a book with pictures, that he really knew what was happening with her.
Wow. So these young people were getting world-class educations even then.
Even without knowing.
Yes,
right.
Without even knowing it. Who supports the maintenance of the building now? Ms. Ford?
The Laurel Grove School Association is set up as the governing board for the school, and there are currently 10 board members who administer the overseeing of the maintenance of the building as well as directing programs for the building.
Okay. All right. Dr. Russell, I know we can set up community tours. Can we bring our students or just come on a Saturday or Sunday and see the facility and learn more about the school?
As a result of the pandemic, Dr. Jackson, the hours have changed for sure. We are looking at scheduled openings for tours in the later this summer maybe or whatever, as we watch CDC guidelines. With that, virtual tours, however, are available. And we've done tours for Mr. Lusk's office, the Lee District Supervisor, for Jack and Jill, for Boy Scouts, for several communities, and so on. So right now, like many places, we're relying on virtual tours. In February, I believe, at the end of February, just before the pandemic shut down, we did host a group of teachers on site that went absolutely beautifully. And they had the opportunity to see what it's like to be in a building when there is no bathroom, a building where lighting is very much subject to the light outside in terms of your ability to work. So it made for a very wonderful primary source evening, in addition to the books and other documents that are in the building that they can handle and review.
Wonderful. Mrs. Ford, one final question for you. Where would one find additional information about the school?
On our website, which is www.laurelgroveschool.org, we have the video of 2 former students who went, including the student who walked 5 miles one way. We also have our curriculum lessons and pictures of descendants who attended the school.
Okay. Ladies, thank you both for sharing the Laurel Grove story with my viewing audience. I would love for you to come back when we can spend another half hour talking more in depth about the school and how Rotary can impact or support your school efforts as well. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Got it. Funding for this program is made possible by the generosity of Rotary District 7610, Virginia. For the Rotary Times program, I am your host, Rotarian Dr. Deborah Jackson from the Rotary Club of McLean, Virginia. You're welcome to join us at any Rotary Club meeting in your area for either breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You can find us or find a club near you by just looking us up on the internet. Many clubs are hosting meetings virtually or in some hybrid format. You just need to look us up for details. Remember, our time is your time, and it's time well spent. Please join us for our next program as we continue to celebrate Rotary's 116 years of service above self.